writing this book and reading that passage was really important because although it's about a daughter and a tia, it still shows the love between a mother and a daughter if there are differences, especially by being queer, if there are misunderstandings. We just don't understand each other. It's not that we hate each other or we want the other expelled, it's just that we don't get it. So for me, telling the story, writing the story is so important. You know, Curtains of Rain to me feels like an altar of all the beautiful people I've witnessed in South Texas.
This is Marisol Cortez, Executive Editor of Deceleration at Deceleration.news. Today, we're excited to be talking with Anel Flores about their new novel, Curtains of Rain, Cortinas de Lluvias. Originally from the Rio Grande Valley, Anel is a writer and artist based here in San Antonio. A trans, queer, lesbiane, and Chicane creative who has made San Antonio their home, their work explores intersectional feminism, queer politics, and resistencia across genres and media, from poetry to fiction to graphic memoir and painting. With an MFA in creative writing from Goddard College, they are the author of the Lambda Literary Award-nominated Empanada, a lesbiana story in Probaditas, which was adapted into a performance piece for stage, as well as the chapbooks Behind the Book Bag and La Fea. And as a visual artist, Anel's work has been featured in numerous exhibitions, including the McNay Museum's Trans-American, NYFA's Nuestra Delta Mágica, and a solo show at UNAM San Antonio titled I Am Home. Published this year by Jaded Ibis Press, their latest novel is Curtains of Rain, a queer coming-of-age story that explores the intersections of homophobia and transphobia with environmental racism in South Texas, specifically the industrial contamination inflicted on Mission, Texas for decades by companies like Monsanto. But it's also a book about the beauty and sacredness of queer familia and the landscapes that hold us all in all our relations, in spite of these histories of violence. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Here's our conversation with Anel. I wonder if you would start just by reading for us an excerpt from the book that for you encapsulates what it's about, kind of what you were wanting to put into the world with this novel.
Awesome. Okay, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to the podcast. Really excited to read from Curtains of Rain. It definitely was 10 years or a lifetime in the making. And so I'm going to read the last chapter called Cacti, and it could seem to folks to be like a spoiler, but it's not, because there's many stories, many people, many voices in the book, so not a spoiler at all, just actually a little entrance into the energy of the book, really, and the spirit of the book. Cacti. When you drove away that night, Dumami wrapped her arms around the trunk of your mesquite tree and cried into the big hole on the side, Tia Chita said. The tree heard Flora lament the loss of her baby. It became her confidant, the one who knew most of her secrets. But why didn't she come after me, Tia? Sol asked. Because she knew he was almost gone. Tia Chita's face softened in a way Sol had never seen, and placed her hand on Sol's forearm, completely covered with tattoos of every maguey, savila, and sotol succulent variation. Mija, the cactuses on your arm are so beautiful. Gracias, tia. There are all different types of succulents that produce tequila. Pues sí, mija, of course, all the different greens and the little white and yellow florecitas are precious too. Chita slid her thumb from side to side across the top of Solitaria's forearm and examined each one, pulling them up close to her eyes that had needed glasses for too long. She flipped over Sol's arm with a tight grip, digging the round edges of her press-on fingernails into the skin to see what was on the other side. They go all around my arm, Tia. It's called a sleeve. Tia Chita looked confused and kept twisting. Ouch, Tia, it doesn't turn all the way around. They laughed, and Tia Chita let Solitaria's arm fall back down into her lap, squeezing her hand around Sol's fingers. Your mommy said you had bigger dreams, bigger plans in a bigger city. She was proud of you. The Achita exhaled off a rolled joint. Plus, mija, she wouldn't have had any energy left to give you. Your papi getting sicker and más sick every day, and Lucia, well, you know Lucia, she's grown and manages well with Manolo. Solitaria's eyes were starting to burn. No llores, mija. But I was alone. No, mija, you weren't. You had your tíos. Su Florecita knew you'd make friends. You were always metiendo en todo. She just knew. How did she know? I still don't get it. I was so sad. Mira, linda, you came to her in her dreams, mija. All of this came to her in her dreams. Dreams she didn't tell anyone about because she didn't want people to think she was crazy, and she was afraid of your father too. She was alone. Most of us mujeres are. She had Lita, she had Virginia, pues sí, pero they also had their own lives together. Sol took a mental note to ask the Achita about her Lita and Virginia after a few days. The keeper of Flora's pain all those years was the earth, she whispered into the hollow trunk of your mezquite. The Achita stood up and walked toward the flowing curtain, put one hand in the front pocket of her delantal, and pointed through the window outside. Right there, mira, mija. She called it Sol's tree. When she talked to your tree, she imagined all the words going down, like into a throat, down into the panza of the earth. And when it rained, she sang debajo de un techito enfrente. Que llueve, la Virgen de la Cueva, cuida mi solitaria. The end.
Thank you so much, Anel. That's such just a beautiful, beautiful passage, and it was such a beautiful close to the book too. And we'll come back to that. I have a question specifically like about that chapter. But just to start, thank you so much for writing this book, for giving voice to queer and trans histories of South Texas, and also South Texas histories of environmental racism as well that may not be familiar to a lot of readers, right? Even a lot of us living in San Antonio or South Texas, right? The histories of environmental racism and contamination in Mission, Texas. And I just wanted to say too, like I remember when you were writing this book, I remember going to we were at something at Gemini Inc. Yeah. It was just like you, me, and Alexandria. Yeah. And maybe one more person or something, and you mentioned like this was your work in progress, right? Yeah. Like you were working on this novel about environmental justice. Yeah. And so I always kind of like had that in the back of my head, like, oh, like Anel is working on a book about environmental justice, and now here it is. Yeah. So congratulations on being able to finish that project and being able to share it with us. Can you maybe talk about why you chose the excerpt you did? Like, why is it such an important passage for you as its author?
You know, when I'm 49, I'm going to be 50. I've been reflecting on that since my birthday in July, and for a while, my whole life. I really have so much admiration for our elders, and in a way that when I see our elders, I see how they're just like walking vessels of things that I want to learn, and I know that are falling away. And all these years of witness here in San Antonio, with Kelly Air Force Base, with the pollution on the east side, and with the Alamo Dome, I could go on and on and on. The water, the coal mine, everything I've witnessed, and especially now again in Boca Chica with SpaceX down in South Texas in the RGV, the Rio Grande Valley, where all these things are happening. I mean, Corpus, you have the coal, you have all the refineries. It's fucking crazy. It's awful. I've watched it, I've witnessed it, and firsthand, my mother is one of the women who received an $800 check because Hayes Salmons, or what we know as Monsanto, was emitting the 8 most deadliest chemicals into Mission, Texas for many years. Too many years, while my mother and my 6 uncles and aunts, my tias and my tios, my grandparents, all my cousins were all inhaling, drinking, eating, sleeping, those pollutions, on top of also witnessing the pollutions of the fruits, the the apples, orange, everything. I mean, the apples, not apples in the valley. The oranges, the the onions, everything. I've witnessed, I've watched, and I've seen us all get sick. I had to have a full hysterectomy before I was 40, I think. My mother, I watched her, all the things that she's had to endure for $800 for being a child in that city. And I knew that. And also, I live as a queer person and as a trans person, and I've been working with my mother on the other intersection, which is my queerness. So my mother understands environmental racism. My mother understands sexism. My mother was a feminist. My mother did leave the Valley and decide to go to college and become go and be a counselor for Edgewood School District. I learned activism through my parents. They know about activism, but for her, it was, learning her what she was fighting for. And I have spent the last 30 years teaching her what I'm fighting for. And so we've taught each other those things. And writing this book and reading that passage was really important because although it's about a daughter and a tia, it still shows the love between a mother and a daughter if there are differences, especially by being queer, if there are misunderstandings. We just don't understand each other. It's not that we hate each other or we want the other expelled. It's just that we don't get it. So for me, telling the story, writing the story is so important. Curtains of Rain to me feels like an altar of all the beautiful people I've witnessed in South Texas. Like every single person there is based on 10 or 20 people that I'm in love with. They're all like conglomerations of wonderful people that I've met in South Texas and the borderlands that have been trailblazers and activists and fighters and lovers and great moms and grandmothers and grocery store owners and curanderas. And so this is a badass tia here that's smoking weed, tia Chita, who's always like coming in and out to make people laugh or do stupid things. But she also holds the wisdom. She was the witness. She was the outsider tia that nobody paid attention to, who also we could imagine would be queer, right? But she comes in to be with the outsider queer kid to tell her the story of her mom. And then, of course, talking into the mesquite, which is a really sacred tree. I didn't just use a mesquite because I see them. I know how sacred they are to the indigenous community of our land. I know how sacred the mesquites are to our water and to the rest of the plants that are growing around them. And so in that mesquite is where we also sit under the shade. I want to name these things. I want to name this magic of our earth. I want to also name that the tree isn't far from the human, that we are all the same, that our friend could be the tree, that we treat the tree as we treat the human, as we treat the animal, as we treat the air, as we treat our spirit, our soul, our queerness, everything. So I guess that piece, just says it all. It's the earth, it's the environment, it's the rain, and the relationships.
I thought there was something like so like powerful or moving in the way that like what Mami Flora can't say directly, to Solitaria, she gives to the tree. And even when Solitaria comes back home and things have changed enough, it's still this indirect telling. It's her aunt, it's her aunt that tells her. It's not this moment of like direct reconciliation between like the daughter and the mom. It's still like this indirect thing. So that was really powerful, I think. So for me, the book was a very much like a queer coming of age story, right? That centers on the very specific kind of wounding that so many queer and trans people experience, which is that intimate violence, right? That familial violence of rejection. Both Sol and Tony are forced to leave their families of origin, and they found family right in San Antonio, and then even in South Texas too. They found Virginia, and her abuelita Lita is also kind of found family in that way, and they find healing through that. But the novel doesn't stop there, right? It's also about this. There's home, and then there's the movement from home to find self, right? but then there's this third act, or like this third movement to the story where they both come back. They come back transformed, but they also come back to a different community, a different family than the one that they left. So it's also the story about kind of like finding that different relationship with your family of origin, and finding healing there as well in the coming back. I also thought it was really telling that the familial violence that both Tony and Solitaria experience when their fathers, specifically, like for both of them it's their dads, when their dads discover their queerness, or in Tony's case their transness, that it is this very physical violence, you know, like their fathers actually intend to assault their children, if not kill their children, and then to blame their children not just for their own dysfunction but for the illness of the entire community, right? Which we know by the end is actually environmental contamination, right? But to sort of like attribute them as like a curse, right, to their own kids. And then Solitaria's mom ends up choosing her violent, abusive husband over Solitaria. Like she tells her directly, right? Like I married him first. I loved him first, so I'm gonna go with him, right? Which for Solitaria is really the deeper wound, right? That emotional betrayal. She's like, you know, why did you choose him? Like, why did you just let me leave the way you did? And I think it's so powerful to just sort of like lay bare that the violence of familial rejection for queer and trans kids is not like, it's not just sort of metaphorical, it's not symbolic, it's not like even just only emotional. Like it is like in many cases this life and death kind of violence. Can you talk about what it was like to write about that wounding sort of intergenerationally, right? Like on the one hand, you're sort of reflecting back on this earlier moment of coming of age for you, but then we're living through another wave of it now in the 2020s, right? And so in some ways you're writing for the generation after you, you know?
You know, it was really interesting. I wrote, when I first wrote the novel, actually the I guess antagonist, or it wasn't the father who was the villain, it was the mother. And I rewrote the entire novel because I was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to the mom? No, I mean, but also that was part of the process, right? I that was the writing process. I hadn't shared it. I had just kind of, it was my own experience because I had that experience with my mother, but I also, it was really, it was life-changing for me to rewrite it and stop myself, because I realized that I really was able to prove that working in the creative space, like with Empanada and with other poetry and with other works that I've written, I was able to understand my mother and why she is who she is. She is the greatest human on the fucking planet. I mean, great. She works so hard to understand me. And now she's like my biggest fan and trans community's biggest fans you'll ever know. But it took 30 years. So I wrote the novel kind of just like as a healing about my mom first. And then I rewrote it. And that's when I was able to pick up like, oh, okay, let me add what I understand about what's happening, what has happened to women. And let me add what has happened to men and people and trans people and grandparents and uncles and aunts. Now it was beyond, you know, looking at, you know, my mother hurt me, which was my own personal thing that I needed to heal from in like getting the story out. Because I was also healing my mom from her environmental, right, her environmental pain and, you know, suffering that she had been going through. So it was like we were having a moment early. And then when I now talk about pain and violence, and I remember, you know, talking about Chon, Solitaria's father, and really there's a chapter that's not in the book, there's a chapter that's not in the book that is where Flora and Chon have just gotten married and, you know, no kids are born yet. That was like early on, the first draft, and they're in love and they're happy. And John comes home, and he's really excited. And I just want to cry because he got a job at Hayes Salmon's. And he is like on the top of the moon. You know, and it's a beautiful chapter, and I wish it was in there, but I also know it can live on its own because he's so happy. And in that chapter, he says, I'm so excited because they said we could bring home all the barrels and we can like use them. And so he, in that chapter, he's rolling an empty barrel of pesticides into the backyard, and he washes the clothes back there with the manguera. And that's the chapter. And so it's like the beginning. And so when I wrote that chapter, I thought, fuck that man. You know, he literally was like, had his hands in the chemicals. He was breathing them every day. And then all our community was barbecuing in those barrels, drinking water, storing rice, storing flour, storing soap, washing, eating out of those pesticides. All those years. They're still probably out there.
Yeah.
You know, and when I understood Chon and the violence of pain and suffering in your physical body, I was able to understand again the farm workers, just all the people.
Yeah.
I am so lucky to not experience that. My father was a farm worker, and he has a story where he says that he looked at his the guy watching them, making sure they didn't go pee or drink water or do anything or
like
stop.
The overseer or whatever.
Yeah, and he says he was a kid or like a teen looking at the man going, I'm gonna work in the shade. You know, my dad would say, I'm gonna work in the shade one day. You know, and a lot happened in writing this novel, and so yeah, the violence is there, and I see it, and I get it that. You know, Chon passed. You didn't learn how he passed just from physical sickness. And then, you know, Tony, Antonia's father, you know, you have to read the book to know about that. But you see that too. You know, there's alcoholism. There's so many things that we do to medicate or to erase our traumas. And so this book is about celebrating through, you know, like being able to get on the other side of the trauma. And see it for what it is, and just, you know, find ways to demystify some of my tios that I'm so mad at, but I can now understand again what they were experiencing in their bodies. You know? So that's about violence, right? So you do have that, and then you also have, like, you know, the gay men that are showing you another where to put some of that anger, you know, where to put some of that pain, where to put some of that trauma. You put it in different places. So I want to show, like, also the blending of, like, the divine feminine is not really about gender. Really, it's about spirit. It's about our earth, right? It's about energy. And so there's just so much. But violence, it's a product of another violence. Right? Which we know.
Yeah. That's really... It's... like, it's such a painful... but like the compassion that we come to when we realize in our families, you know, that the harm done to us came from, you know, other harms that were perpetrated, right? Like, and it doesn't make it any, like, it's a very heavy thing to sort of like bear witness to that, but I think it's also, if there is any healing that happens, it has to come through. I mean, and I think, like, fiction, like being able to write it as a story is such a, like, a sacred thing, to be able to do some of that work of moving from, like, you know, this was done to me, to, you know, what was it like for the person, you know, who was actually behaving in these, like, horrible, violent ways.
Right, and just finding ways, you know, like, I think about and talk about how a lot of times it's the safest place to put those traumas, right? It becomes almost like a little, like a sanctuary. You know, in my work, I try to create, I mean, and I had great teachers, like, I mean, not like literally like painting teachers or anything, but like Liliana Wilson, for example, who's this great visual artist. But when you see her work, you're like, wow, it's exquisite. But then you know what it's about. You know what it's about. You know it's about the violence. You get closer to the drawing and you see the little skulls or you see the sadness when you get into it, but it gives you an opportunity to also like see beauty, the beauty that comes on the other end, on the other side of that relationship. And so to create the novel wrapped in poetry and wrapped in the beauty of our trees and the beauty of the wind and the beauty of the rain and the beauty of the food and the smells and the laughter, wrap the stories in the beauty. And also, like, Curtains of Rain is about how beautiful South Texas is. Like, at the end of the day, I could be I'm crying, yes, and it's sad and there is trauma, but my God, what a beautiful place. Like, I can't, once I like leave San Antonio's skyline, like if I don't see San Antonio anymore in my rear view when I'm driving home to the valley, my shoulders drop, the windows, I feel like I can open. It's just a whole energy. It's a whole energy when you're over by the water, when you're closer to Mexico. It's a space, it's a culture that is many cultures overlapping. It's beautiful and kind and loving and funny and fun and joyous, and there's a lot of music, and everyone has the best mariachi team in every high school, and everyone's, it's a beautiful place. So I wanted to show that, like the colors and all of that too.
Yeah, that really came through, and I think especially because so much of the book's kind of early, until halfway through, we're seeing this place through the eyes of children. There can be like an innocence to the land that persists even still, despite these layers of like violence or racism or contamination that have happened, which we don't really understand even what we're looking at until the end, right? When Solitaria and Tony are adults and they tell us, right? But there's those early chapters where they're swimming in the rio, right? Those are beautiful. They're picking moras on the banks of the river. Her Lita sends her out to get the hierbas, and she does, but she loses them. But the hierbas and the trees and there's like a sweetness, like an innocence, right? Which helps us see the ways that the land has not been and will not be colonized, right? Yeah. In spite of what has been done to it. Or like, I think the first kind of like hint for me was, maybe there's something like wrong here, where she wants to run in the spray. She's like breathing, she's having quesadillas with her Lita, and the windows are open, and then she's tasting like the stuff from the crop duster, like going over the oranges, and it tastes sweet. And she's like, Lita, I want to run out and eat it more or whatever. And her grandma says, it's medicina, for the plants. And then you're like, oh wait, like wait, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah, it's all fucked up, but it's all real. I mean, that's real. Kids wanted to run outside. I mean, I hear those stories every day. Oh yeah, I want to run. We want to chase the plane. We were chasing the planes. They were chasing the planes. Yeah. Like, it was so fun. Yeah. And they're, now they're 70, 80, 90 years old. Yeah. It's like wild.
But yeah, I mean, also not until the end, that beautiful scene, very pastoral, very like, the shining of the light off the water, the way the water feels when they're swimming without, just in their chones or they're naked, and like it's very beautiful. And then at the end you realize, oh, the canals and the the river, like that's where they were dumping, but I think what comes through before that is the love for the land and the connection to the land that persists, and that can't be destroyed, and that still exists, right? Like for us to turn to, like Mami Flora did, right? Yeah. At the end with the tree, the mesquite. Can you talk a little bit about the title, The Curtains of Rain? Because it recurs several times through the book. I think the first time I remember coming across it maybe was in the river scene.
Yeah, I think in the river scene.
And then the curtains of rain are also the curtains that are falling down as her sister is kind of watching Sol pack up to leave town. When Lucy finally like goes back into the house and she's just like standing and watching her sister leave. And then I think we come across it a couple more points and just kind of it's kind of like a refrain throughout. Can you talk about that title, what it means to you?
Yeah, I mean, it occurred on Highway 77 going down to South Texas. Erika and I were driving, and I was going down probably to work on the novel at some point, and just like working on titles, and I don't know if you've driven that highway, but I talk every time I do like a whole like picturesque like dream because it's so beautiful. And we happened to be driving this one day, and there was a massive Cortina de Lluvia just striped across the sky. So it's like, you know, when half of the sky's blue and the other half of the sky's like totally dark gray. And then I remember Erika said, like, oh, mira, Cortina de Lluvia, look at that, so gorgeous. I'm like, oh my God, it's so beautiful, curtains of rain, so beautiful. And it was actually Erika who was like, oh my God, that's the title of your book. And I wrote it down. So Erika titled the book, and then I have to give her credit because she's amazing. And then, of course, you know, it just kept showing up for me. I started to realize, like, how it can be so many things from every angle, right? It could be you're hiding behind it, you could be protecting, you could be shining, you could be dancing in it. You know, I also applied it at some point to one of the drag queens in the book.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so there's like a lot of care, you know, and for me it's like this image of the divine feminine just like showering down, or just like this cleanse, these constant cleanses, these constant pour downs, these releases, right, if you will. And so I love rain. I think it's a beautiful symbol. I also feel like it serves as a really nice scene like insert for like energy, symbolism, water, just thinking of so many things in it. And yeah, that's where it comes from, really. It comes from that moment. It comes from the beauty of that, and also just around that feminine, just really following that water, thinking a lot of the symbolism just around, you know, the circle of life, that cliche, but how water falls, how water feeds, and then there's like the imagery in the book of the maguey, and how the maguey is also, you know, Mayawen, or the divine feminine, the, you know, goddess of the fertility, of rebirth, of shedding skin, of all these things. And so it's just, rain for me serves as that picture of like starting over, starting a new cleanse, a new scene in your life. You know, there's always that movement. Yeah. And so it felt magical to me. So that's where it's from.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And then coming back to that last chapter, where we learn how much Flora did grieve Sol's having to leave town. Having to flee. So, you know, so much so that she could really only give that grief to the earth itself, right?
Yeah.
To the mesquite tree in the yard. There was a sort of similar moment, I think, in my novel, where the main character immerses herself in the San Antonio River and kind of floats downstream, and then gets out, and then is sitting on the banks and sort of sees the earth sort of like with its layers of colonization like stripped away, right? Like sees the, you know, the nopales and the, you know, the deer and the like all the animal, you know, birds, and kind of like gives her grief to the earth, because it feels like that's the only entity that's sort of like large enough, you know, to hold it. And so the last chapter in your book had a sort of similar kind of idea, like only La Madre Tierra is big enough to really contain that loss, which in the story is more specifically like the loss of our queer and trans youth, from being forced from their homes. Can you, I guess, we already talked a little bit about that passage, but just if there's anything else you want to say about the writing of, deciding to sort of end there, and the way the novel closes, and also like what Sol learns, from her tia Chita.
Just also, I know you mentioned your novel and the layers of colonization, and that I want to hook it back into that. I wanted to end there because it's not over, right? It's not like nothing was really solved, or there isn't like an ending. Arturo Madrid said like 20 years ago in a talk, he came to talk to the Nalak artist, and he said, I never forgot it, he said, our ancestors, when they were born, they never were like complaining, like, why do I have to build this city? They just were born and they kept building the city, and they knew they would never see it done. They just built it. That's what we were all doing together, just building the city. And I remember him saying that to a bunch of us, and it stuck with me. And I just, the last chapter of the book is like, we're still building these relationships. We're still learning, I still have one family member I'm deeply working on, that was an ex-police officer, but I'm working on it. And he loves me. And if something happened today, he would be here in an instant. But he's got a little bit of a way of thinking we don't all agree with, But there's a lot of layers, and so I wanted to just like end there and say like, yeah, the conversation's still going to happen. We're always going to still try to we always want to learn. We always want to keep understanding the earth more, understanding our mother more, our sister more, our uncle more, our friend more, our family more, listening. I wanted to end with like also this feeling of ceremony, this feeling of being in ceremony with the earth, and this also relationships between tias and queer kids is really prominent in culture, where you have like the one tia who like is always like, coming to your rescue, or like going to help you with your mom, or going to, and I wanted to give that cultural significance. I wanted her to be the one that, the tia that everyone's like, oh my God, why her? She's always a pain in the ass. I wanted her to be the one that delivers the good news, because usually it's the pain in the ass that's the one doing the work, and I wanted to, just give those family members, the ones that the outcasts, I wanted to give them the end. I wanted to say they're the ones that are in the spotlight. They're the ones doing the work. They're the ones that are fighting. Maybe they look like they're all misshapen and in every other direction in the world, but that's because they are doing that work in every direction, and they are everywhere. And that's usually the queer folks. We're usually everywhere. We're usually the one that take care of our parents at the end. We're usually the ones that are like the activists somehow, some way. And I wanted to show that's a real thing, and lift up the LGBTQ community, the trans community, the gender non-binary community, the drag community. I wanted to lift up our community, because we don't see ourselves in these beautiful stories of like triumph enough. We're always waiting for, and we always joke, like I talk to my queer friends, we're always, in every movie when we see like a queer couple kiss, we're like, oh my God, someone's going to beat him up, or oh my God, someone's going to throw something through the window. Like we're always like triggered that something violent's going to happen afterwards. It's awful. And I'm laughing because that's, again, we talked about that. It's kind of how we get through it, the fear. But I did have a little bit of that in here too, because that's part of our story. But the end is about really just lifting up those outcasts, those relationships.
Yeah. And lastly, as a writer, what do you hope that queer and trans kids growing up in South Texas in 2025, maybe in rural communities, right, like far from at least visible community, like what do you want them to know, either through this book or just in general, as not quite an elder, right? But now we're like sort of in this space of not being young people anymore.
What do I want? I mean, when I read some of my first queer books, like I'll just name the one that comes to my mind. One of the earlier ones would have been Carla Trujillo's What Night Brings. She has an 11-year-old Marcy who's queer, and I think like the first line of the book is something like, I wish I was a boy, or something. It's like that kind of line. And I remember reading that line going like, oh, me too. Right there, like first page. And then I thought, oh, cool. I can do that. Like they want to be a boy and I want to be a boy. It works. Like this is right. Like there's someone else out there like me. And And I want whoever reads this book and whoever is out there to just remember that there are people out there like you, that we're all here, and that there are more people than you think. And we might not even look like you, but we're like you. And that I am living proof that I think there are more good people in the world than there are bad people. And yeah, that just write your story, find ways to heal, find what what's your thing, and don't go anywhere. I don't know. So many things. Many things I wish someone could have told me. I wish I could just go grab their hand and bring them over here and take them to walk around the neighborhood, or, just I don't know. Just don't go anywhere. Stay alive. Be fine. We're going to be okay somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, we will. Together. We definitely will together. Yeah.
I thank you so much for your time and your creative energy and your wisdom.
Thank you.
And everybody read Curtains of Rain.
Yay! Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here with us and for listening today. For more about Anel's work, you can visit their website at anelflores.com. If you'd like to read Curtains of Rain, you can get a copy at jadedibispress.com. Or if you're here locally in San Antonio, you can pick up a copy at Nowhere Books, or The Twig, or the San Antonio Public Library. Support your local writers and artists. Support your local indie bookstores and small presses. Support libraries and librarians and queer and trans literature, especially by writers of color. And support your local grassroots media by visiting us at deceleration.news. Gracias a todos. We will see you next time.